Why is this a bad thing in the view of Republicans? Well, electric vehicles have fewer parts. They require fewer workers to build them. From a technological perspective, that sounds like progress to me.
So we're trying to kill baseload, and then we're trying to kill liquid fuels in favor of EVs. And when we go, if you're on Team EV, you're on Team China because they're controlling 85% of the world's rare earth minerals.
So they'll have to really invest into building their brands, as well as overcoming this perception that maybe China-made is not as good in quality. But we've really seen these Chinese automakers spend a lot of time and effort into improving the quality design into their vehicles, especially in EVs, where a lot of their technology has leapfrogged their competitors.
All that and more, so let's get to it. Tesla stock is down about 1% in the pre-market. For context, over the past 90 days, Tesla is down a little over 2%. Year to date, however, Tesla is still over 100%. Going back an entire year, Tesla is down almost 10%. We're sitting at 244.75 right now, and I expect Tesla to continue to fall. But just because I expect it doesn't mean it'll necessarily happen. But if you're down for selling your Tesla shares, I'll pick them up at this price.
President Biden will meet with striking UAW workers tomorrow, putting himself in the middle of the labor debate amid the transition to electric vehicles. And former President Trump not far behind. He's going to be in Michigan on Wednesday, and it comes as he launches a new campaign against EVs. Yahoo Finance senior columnist Rick Newman is here with more. So Rick, against EVs, what are the details?
Right. So everything else is politicized in America, so why not electric vehicles?
This is ridiculous, but let's continue.
There's this Republican line that Trump has really seized on, which is that Biden caused the United Auto Workers strike because of his fervent support for electric vehicles and all the subsidies he has signed into law to try to get automakers to build more electric vehicles and people to buy more electric vehicles. Biden's policy is he wants 50% of all new car sales to be electrics by 2030.
I don't really give a what Biden wants. Battery electric vehicles are going to supplant the internal combustion engine. Battery costs are going to come down over time. These are computers on wheels. People are going to rather want this. There is software in the works that is going to make transit safer than anyone can ever imagine, saving thousands upon thousands of lives on highways. This is inevitable. The transition is inevitable. The IRA is there so that we don't have to rely on China for most of these materials. It isn't Biden's will for electric vehicles. It is the exponential demand growth that Tesla has spurred across the world. These government policies aren't doing the legacy automakers any real favors because they're making electric vehicles poorly in every sense of the word. Their quality is bottom tier. The cost to produce these things, bottom tier. But the only way to improve that and not go bankrupt is getting in the mud and producing as many as you can, realizing mistakes, and then correcting them as quickly as possible. Regardless of policy, this was bound to happen. In my opinion, it's happening way too late already. If you plan to go belly up in a decade's time, then continue on course. But even these CEOs, Mary Barra, Jim Farley, they understand where they need to be. It's just harder than any of them could ever have anticipated.
Why is this a bad thing in the view of Republicans? Well, electric vehicles have fewer parts. They require fewer workers to build them. From a technological perspective, that sounds like progress to me. I mean, that's the whole history of capitalism, which is that you build a better mousetrap, you become more efficient, you improve your margins, and that's the way technology progresses. But put this in a political context, and I guess they're trying to turn that into a bad thing because it means there will be fewer automaker jobs. Now, that is not 100% true because another thing Biden has done is create these incentives for manufacturers to build all these green energy plants, electric vehicle batteries and things like that, to build these all in the United States instead of importing that. And that is actually happening, but Trump's not going to mention that. He just wants the auto workers and he wants voters, especially in swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin, to think, oh, EVs must be bad. Biden wants EVs, therefore I will vote for Trump. I have no idea if he's going to get any traction with that line of reasoning. It's not really right, but he's going to give it a shot.
No matter how hard you try to fight against the tides of technology, you will lose that battle every single time. You either have to adapt or go extinct. The IRA does everything in its power to keep Ford, GM, all of these potential EV makers here in America a fighting chance to claim market share for American consumers.
Well, and then there's also another constituency in all of this, which is the auto dealers. We were talking a little bit earlier about CarMax. For those who are selling EVs and being asked by the automakers to sell EVs, they're not necessarily very happy about it either, because an EV doesn't need an oil change, right? It doesn't need as much service as a combustion engine does. So
you really can't blame them. If it don't make dollars, baby girl, it can't make sense.
The dealers are not making the money on that aspect, right? So it's very interesting, all these competing constituencies here. What I'm curious about, Rick, also is unions are traditionally very core Democratic, contingent here. Is that being upended?
Trump is definitely trying to upend it. We could talk for the next 45 minutes about all the things you raised, Julie. Just go back to this argument. So, so electric vehicles require less maintenance. Don't all consumers want their products to require less maintenance? I mean, that is an unambiguously good thing for consumers. And dealers, by the way, there are pretty good markups on a lot of these electric vehicles. So they're making pretty good money on a lot of them. To go back to the unions, the UAW endorsed Joe Biden in 2020, which upset Donald Trump, obviously. So, Mr. Vengeful, he was trying to get back at the UAW for this. The UAW has not yet endorsed Biden in 2024, but they almost certainly will. But Trump, at the same time, has gotten a very large portion of union vote for a Republican who is not endorsed by the union itself. That happened in 2016. And it happened in 2020. So a big part of what Donald Trump is trying to do, and probably the main thing he's trying to do, is just get some vengeance against the leadership of the United Auto Workers. And one of his other lines is that he's been telling auto workers, your leadership has sold you down the river. That's his phrase. And he wants to tell auto workers that their union leaders suck, and try to roil the union and see if he can just cause some mischief within the union. So you can vote for whoever you want if you're in a union. You don't have to vote for the party that your union endorses. But Trump, in a way, is just trying to make trouble, and he's campaigning. He's trying to get the votes of blue-collar workers in Michigan.
I don't really care who you vote for either. Trump, Biden, Donald Duck, I don't really give a f. Now, I feel the IRA is completely unnecessary for Tesla. But it is absolutely necessary if we want Ford, GM, Stellantis to exist in the decades to come. Tesla don't give a shit because they've got like a 2-decade head start. Since we're already so political, let's continue.
Earlier today, Brian Sullivan sat down with Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota and GOP presidential candidate, at the American Energy Security Summit in Oklahoma City. Now, North Dakota is the third largest producer of crude oil in the country. They discussed the transition to clean energy and how to decouple from China. But first, Brian asked the governor what he thinks is wrong with America's current energy policy. Listen to this.
Do tell, Governor of Dakota. Wait a minute, there's 2 Dakotas?
Well, the current energy policy of the Biden administration is shut down U.S. oil and gas industry, shut down anything to do that is, consistent, stable baseload power energy that we have right now, and go to all intermittent. I mean, they want to have the grid is being destabilized because somehow there's this idea that we can have just wind and solar, which is totally weather dependent.
Whoa, ease up on the bull. My guy, my meter is about to explode. No one said anything about using only wind or solar. That would be dumb, even for planet-hugging Democrats. But I get it. This is what you have to tell your constituents so that they continue to vote for you.
But we can't permit nuclear. We're shutting down our base load, including where we have an opportunity through thermal base load to decarbonize thermal base load in our country.
And base load meaning the sort of the always-on power source.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so if you want an air conditioning on a day like today, or heat in the wintertime, or run your manufacturing plants, or have your hospital operate or your school without having to buy a diesel power generator, generator. I mean, in our country, we have had part of our success in our country is that we've had, when you go to the light switch, you turn it on, there's power that's there, as opposed to having a sticker that says, oh, this may or may not work based on weather dependency.
Talking about right now? This may or may not work based on weather dependency? Someone told one of the two governors in Dakota that you can use battery storage to offset energy for solar and wind. But wait, that wouldn't help his state's agenda now, would it?
So we're trying to kill baseload, and then we're trying to kill liquid fuels in favor of EVs. And when we go, if you're on Team EV, you're on Team China because they're controlling 85% of the world's rare earth minerals.
Isn't that what the IRA is trying to combat?
It's a fantasy that we're going to have all transportation move to EVs. We have to have liquid fuels, and nobody produces liquid fuels cleaner, safer, and smarter than we do here in the United States. And we should be supporting that industry, and we should be exporting. Back to your first question, day one, start selling energy to our friends and allies. Stop having them buy them from our adversaries. Putin doesn't even invade Ukraine if he didn't already have all of Western Europe dependent on his energy source.
Moving all transportation to EVs overnight, I would agree, is a fantasy. And our energy demands are going to increase exponentially along with the adoption of battery electric vehicles. Renewables like solar and wind are going to be used to support the grid, not replace it, at least not right now. That would be a fantasy, which you should be all too familiar because it feels like you live in a fantasy world, Mr. Governor.
How do we do what you say you're doing, what you would like to do, and protect the climate at the same time?
Well, we're doing that in North Dakota right now, and I would just say, as you noted, I mean, nobody cares more about the land, the water, the air, the soil health than the people that live there. And in North Dakota, where we've got 90% of our surface area is farms and ranchers, many of those are multi-generational farms and ranches. They care about all of that, and it's why we consistently have among the cleanest air and water in the nation.
Who gives a shit? Because the water and air are the cleanest in Dakota? It must be like that the world over? Who's living in fantasy land now? That's not what the question was asking.
Also know that we can do things like decarbonize baseload with carbon sequestration. We can decarbonize liquid fuels with carbon sequestration and enhanced oil recovery. The answer here is innovation, not regulation. We're in a Cold War with China. The way you beat China is with a strong economy. The way you have a strong economy is you innovate, which is what this country has always done, as opposed to regulate, which is, both environmentally and financially trying to actually shut down entire industries, which again raises the price. I mean, this energy policy is choking every American. Inflation is affecting every industry, every product, whether it's the gas at the pump or the food on your table, that's being pushed up. Those prices are being pushed up by the Biden energy policies.
Now, I won't even try to refute that. I'm a big fan of innovation versus regulation. The tides of capitalism will eventually reach our shores. To me, the regulation is unnecessary, especially if you want things to continue as is. We're going to need the oil and gas industry more than ever, but we're also going to need to bring in-house production of batteries so that we can make these renewables cheaper. This regulation is just ensuring that we are not so dependent on China.
But how do you de-China from energy, because energy is not part of the economy. In many ways, energy is the economy. How do you de-China and not make inflation worse? We all want things to be made here. I want a solar panel that is made here. I want a wind turbine that is made here. But if it's made here, it probably, likely will cost more. How do we balance out the two?
The real crisis we have is the battle that we're up against with China. And China imports more oil and gas than any other nation in the world, 10 million barrels of oil a day. And then we've got 4 cabinet members from the Biden administration that have been over there in succession this summer, and none of them have talked about energy as a tool to win the Cold War. This is the one thing that we could be doing to increase our leverage and power against China.
What, selling North Dakota oil, American oil to China?
Oh, sell it to Japan, sell it to South Korea, sell it to the Philippines, take our allies in the Pacific, who could help us stop the aggression of China, stop China, who's got the world's largest Navy.
I'm still waiting for this motherfucker to answer the question. Oh, wait, he can't, because the answer is, well, that's what the IRA is supposed to do. Again, I'm invested in Tesla, and this stuff is going to happen regardless whether or not we have regulation or not. But I'm also an American, and I understand our government isn't just going to let Ford and GM go bankrupt. What does that mean? tax dollars for bailouts. The IRA is foresight in an effort to try to prevent Ford and GM from going bankrupt. Of course, it's easier said than done, as Tesla will reap the rewards of most of this IRA, provided they don't put a cap on how much one company can benefit from this bill, which they probably should, because Tesla's gonna eat up all the funds for the IRA. Talking politics always leaves a sour taste in my mouth. There are some valid points mingled in the bullshit of that Dakota governor. There are some coherent thoughts tied around Trump's decision to be against EVs, but they're all rooted in a cesspool of technological ignorance. If America is not careful, what's happening in the EU will definitely be happening over here shortly.
Tell us about the Zeekr brand and, I guess, how does it fit within this market?
The Zeekr brand is owned by Geely, one of China's largest independent car makers. Now, Geely is the parent company of Volvo as well, a very long-storied Swedish brand. And Geely has also set up design centers in Sweden as well as China to help bring these kind of European design philosophy as well as technical expertise to Geely's brands, and that includes Zeekr. So a lot of Zeekr's design style is influenced by these Swedish designers, engineers, and so they're hoping to help set them apart from all of these other Chinese EV brands that are expanding into Europe, including other luxury brands like NIO, as well as the more budget brands like BYD, as well as MG.
Yeah. We won't be able to keep these Chinese EV makers from our shores for much longer. Ford, GM, they need to get on the ball right now.
We were just discussing earlier the EU anti-subsidy investigation. How will Zeekr navigate this?
The biggest tool they really have to try to avoid any sort of accusation of, subsidy that have helped them to achieve scale is to set the price high enough for the European market that really prices if any subsidies that they may have received. So, for example, the Zeekr X, their compact SUV, is selling for as much as 20,000 euros more in Europe than what is prices in China. So they're hoping that by setting the price enough, it can really offset these accusations that, the European Commission is accusing these Chinese EV makers of flooding the market with cheap EVs. So the pricing strategy is basically, saying that, well, no, actually our prices are very reasonable compared to what it is, what it could have been selling.
Two things. One, let's take a look. Chinese EV sales in Europe grow. 2020, 1.1%. 2021, 2%. Looks like a doubling if you're looking at the chart. How about 2022? 4.1%? That's another doubling, folks. And in 2023, we're at 5.6%. Q3 results are right around the corner. What are the odds that the first two quarters that totaled up 5.6% end up at 10%? I'll let you do the math. Demand for Chinese EVs are growing in Europe. You'd have to be a fool to think that this same scenario will not play out here in America, given the opportunity and the time. And two, they could be selling these things for even cheaper. Who could really be undercutting the legacy automakers over there in Europe?
A lot of challenges, though, when it comes to not just the European market, but across the globe in some of these other international markets that it's ambitious about trying to tap.
Yes, so Chinese EV brands are really trying to expand into all corners of the globe now that China's slowing economy is seeing weakening demand. So not just in Europe, but in Southeast Asia, Middle East, or South America, these brands are facing challenges that they're not as well known as the long-established American, European, and Japanese brands. So they'll have to really invest into building their brands, as well as overcoming this perception that maybe China-made is not as good in quality. But we've really seen these Chinese automakers spend a lot of time and effort into improving the quality design into their vehicles, especially in EVs, where a lot of their technology has leapfrogged their competitors.
What? Leapfrog their competitors? You're damn right. Any automaker not named Tesla should be quaking in their boots. You've just seen their growth in Europe. Did they say South America? Oh man, that's pretty close to North America, isn't it? Isn't it? In conclusion, regardless of politics, regardless of regulation, battery electric vehicles are not the enemy. I'll continue to sound alarm bells that these Chinese EV makers are on their way. They're of no threat to Tesla, but for these legacy auto manufacturers, yeah, things are about to get real rough real quick. That's all I got for you today. Be easy. Peace.